At 85 years old, a man who had spent his entire life keeping things close to the vest finally opened his heart. Al Kaline, Mr. Tiger, the quiet superstar who let his bat, his glove, and his grace do the talking for decades, stunned everyone when he revealed the 5 people he loved the most. Why did he wait so long? And who made that list? Was it his family? His legendary teammates? Or someone no one ever expected? For a man so private, this wasn't just a confession. It was a glimpse into the soul of a Hall of Famer. 1. Madge Louise Kaline. The very first name Al Kaline spoke was not a teammate, not a coach, not even a fellow Hall of Famer. It was Madge, the woman who stood by him long before the bright lights of Tiger Stadium ever did. They married in 1954, when Al was only 19 years old, still a skinny kid trying to prove he belonged in the big leagues. While the world saw his smooth swing and flawless arm, Madge saw the nervous young man who would call her late at night from the road just to hear her voice. Through every road trip that stretched weeks, through the endless travel, the injuries, the pressure of being a franchise icon, Madge was there. She raised their family while he chased pennants. She steadied him when self-doubt crept in. She reminded him that life was bigger than batting titles and World Series rings. Kaline never needed the spotlight at home because Madge gave him something the game could never provide: unconditional love. For 65 years, theirs was a marriage that endured the way few in sports ever could. 2. Mike Kaline. The second name was his son Mike. Like his father, Mike had baseball in his blood. He played at college, signed a professional contract, and carried the family name onto the diamond. He never reached the dizzying heights of a Hall of Fame career, and that never mattered. What mattered to Al was watching his son chase the same dream with the same fire. Kaline once said that real success wasn't measured by the numbers in the record book, but by the lessons you leave behind. To Mike, he passed on the lessons of discipline, humility, and respect. Al never demanded that his son be like him. Instead, he taught him that being a Kaline meant something deeper, playing the game and living life the right way. For Al, seeing Mike carry himself with dignity and effort was more meaningful than any trophy. 3. Mark Kaline. The third name was his other son, Mark, who influenced his father not through box scores, but through conversations. Mark was curious about the man behind the ball player. He asked the questions that others never dared to ask. One memory stuck with Al forever. Mark once looked at him and asked, "Dad, were you ever afraid of failing?" It was a question that cut past the highlight reels and the applause, and Al answered honestly, "Of course I was, but fear just meant the moment mattered." That single exchange revealed more about Al Kaline's humanity than any statistic could. He was not immune to fear or doubt. He just learned to use it as fuel. Through Mark, the world caught a rare glimpse of Kaline not as a superstar, but as a man vulnerable, honest, and resilient. 4. Norm Cash. The fourth name was Norm Cash, his teammate and closest friend for over a decade. If Kaline was quiet and composed, Cash was loud, funny, and larger than life. Together, they were the beating heart of the Detroit Tigers lineup during the 1962nd one. The steady force, the other, the spark of energy. Kaline remembered vividly the tense atmosphere of the 1968 World Series. The Tigers carried the weight of an entire city, longing for triumph. In that pressure cooker of a clubhouse, it was Cash who cracked a joke that broke the silence, sending the room into laughter. That one moment reminded Al that baseball was still a game, and that joy could turn pressure into power. Their friendship was built on balance. The joker and the gentleman, side by side, lifting each other higher than they could have gone alone. 5. George Kell. The final name was George Kell, a Hall of Famer in his own right, a fellow Tiger, and, for Al Kaline, a mentor. When Kaline arrived in the big leagues as a shy teenager, it was Kell who showed him how to handle himself, not just as a ball player, but as a professional and a man. Years later, When Kaline moved from the field to the broadcast booth, it was Kell again who guided him, this time as a partner on air. The two became the voices of Detroit summers, their conversations as much a soundtrack to fans as the crack of the bat. And Kell left him with a piece of wisdom that defined Kaline's own philosophy: you don't have to say much to mean a lot. It was advice Kaline carried everywhere in the locker room, at home, and in life. Speak less, but when you do, make it count. One by one, these 5 names revealed the soul of Al Kaline. Not just a ball player, but a husband who cherished loyalty, a father who found meaning in his children's growth, a teammate who treasured laughter and trust, and a student who never forgot his teacher. These weren't just the 5 people he loved most. They were the 5 pillars of the man behind the legend. To understand why this revelation mattered so much, you have to remember who Al Kaline was. For Detroit fans, he wasn't just another great ball player. He was the ball player. The man who debuted as a teenager, never spent a single day in the minors, and went on to become an 18-time All-Star, a 10-time Gold Glove winner, and a World Series champion in 1968. They called him Mr. Tiger for a reason. Kaline played his entire 22-year career in a single uniform. No free agency drama, no chasing bigger contracts, no headlines about controversy. Just loyalty to a city, to a franchise, and to the game itself. And yet, for all his greatness, he was a mystery off the field. Reporters often said he was polite, but guarded, gracious, but private. Fans saw the elegance in right field, the clutch hits at the plate, but rarely saw beyond the smile he gave in interviews. Kaline lived by the belief that the game, not the man, should be in the spotlight. That's why when, at age 85, he finally pulled back the curtain on his personal life, people listened. Because this was more than just a list of names. It was the story of who shaped his life, his character, and his heart. When Al Kaline finished naming those 5 people, it became clear this wasn't just a list, it was a roadmap of his life. Each name represented something larger than the person themselves. A value, a principle, a truth about who he was. Madge symbolized loyalty, the kind of steadfast love that never wavered, the same loyalty he gave back to Detroit for 22 straight seasons. Mike and Mark represented legacy not just in baseball, but in character. Through his sons, Kaline passed down lessons about humility, resilience, and the courage to face fear without letting it define you. Norm Cash stood for friendship, the reminder that even in the most pressurized moments, laughter and camaraderie could lift a team higher than talent alone. And George Kell represented gratitude, a recognition that no one, not even a Hall of Famer, makes it on his own. Mentorship, guidance, and respect for those who paved the way mattered as much as home runs and gold gloves. For a man who had always been reluctant to speak about himself, these 5 names told his story better than any highlight reel could. They showed that greatness isn't measured only in numbers, but in the relationships that carry us through. At 85 years old, Al Kaline wasn't talking about baseball anymore. He was talking about life, love, and the people who made it all worthwhile. In the end, Al Kaline's revelation wasn't about statistics, championships, or fame. It was about love. About the 5 people who defined his journey more than any box score ever could. For fans, he will always be Mr. Tiger, the man who patrolled right field with elegance, who delivered in the clutch, who brought a World Series back to Detroit in 1968. But in that quiet moment at age 85, he was simply Al. A husband honoring the woman who stood by his side, a father proud of his sons, a teammate remembering the laughter of a friend, a student giving thanks to a mentor. That's the power of this list. It reminded us that even the greatest legends are human, and that what we leave behind isn't just numbers on a scoreboard, but the love we shared with the people closest to us. So now the question turns to us. If you reached 85 and were asked to name the 5 people you loved most, who would they be? And what story would those names tell about your life? Because in the end, That's the true legacy, not just the records, not just the trophies, but the love that endures long after the cheers have faded.